You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Inside Commerce podcast, sponsored by Swap and Scale Commerce Engine. Today we've got a super interesting episode focused on order management, which is an area that I've personally seen a lot of kind of interest and demand around recently. And also we're joined by OneStock, who have received a lot of hype recently as a result of their recent very large fundraise. Thanks for joining us, Joe. Do you want to give us a little bit of a kind of intro to you and also OneStock? And talk us through kind of the recent raise, the business you're offering, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course. I'm Joe Till. I'm the sales director for the UK and Northern Europe. I lead the team in the region. So OneStock's been a tale of organic growth. So we've grown from a bootstrap business into serving over 100 retailers now globally. And there's some quite big news earlier in the week where we had a fundraising round from Summit Partners. That was $72 million. So now the aims, the aspirations of the business are very large. But along the way, we picked up many sort of large clients. We've worked with many big vendors. So we think we're ideally placed to hopefully execute on their vision to make us the category leader in OMS.
Great. Yeah, super interesting. And I guess just to start off with, I think an OMS or OMS systems are probably more, associated with like larger retailers, kind of omni-channel, more complex businesses. But I've certainly seen it coming up with smaller brands recently. So I guess just to kind of set the scene, and for some of those smaller brands that maybe don't know the ins and outs or even what an OMS is, can you just kind of give us a bit of a definition on, what an order management system is and the value it brings to an e-commerce business?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, Paul. I think if you look at sort of the dynamics that, I guess if we sort of go back to sort of 10 years ago, actually e-commerce trading was quite easy. You had a website, you had stock and you had a customer, and it was a very linear process. I think with the way the world is now, it's just more complex in every direction. So you think about it from a sales channel perspective, you may have one site, you may have multiple sites. You may have marketplaces, you might have social commerce, you may even have stores, and that's just at a front-end perspective. If you then think about it as a back-end perspective, as a scaling retailer, you may have your own DC, you might have 3PLs, you might have stores, you might have other people manufacturing products. So I guess if you think about the complexity in the supply chain and the complexity in the front end, one thing that every brand and every retailer wants to do is to be able to sell any product to any customer on any channel at any moment in time. And really that's where the order management systems sits. It enables that capability, and also it mitigates the risk of overselling, because the one thing a retailer can't do is sell the same product to two people. So we're very much an enabler from that perspective, where we can enable the full inventory to be sold on all of the sales channels, but also manage the complexity of a larger supply chain and more sales channels and more complexity in the business as a whole.
Yeah, great. And I think before we jump into the questions, I just briefly on that piece around, smaller and more simple businesses looking at OMSs than maybe I would have expected a few years ago. One of the drivers has been, I'd say the typical drivers are around pre-ordering and also better utilizing inventory from particularly other kind of 3PLs around the world to serve users in a different demographics. They don't want to lose the order. Would you say, is that a trend that you've seen more recently? I guess the OMS coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think global supply chains are bigger and more complex. Also, that's where the opportunity sits as well. And one of the sort of the benefits of the order management system is, if you think about it conceptually, you've got a front end taking the order, you've got a WMS processing the order in the warehouse, and then you've got some form of transit taking the order to a customer. The order management system is the only platform that has visibility of that end-to-end process. So we know when an order's been raised, we know when it's been picked, we know when it's been packed, we know when it's been dispatched, we know when it's out for delivery and on its way. And we don't just know that at the end of the journey, we know that we can know that at the start of the journey as well, so we can build out a profile of how long each of those elements take, and give the brand the ability to surface that information up front at the front end, to give them a sort of a availability to promise it and honour that from an operational perspective as well.
Hi, I'm Thomas, Director Growth at Scale. The world's fastest growing e-commerce platform has landed in the UK, with global brands like Manchester United, Deichmann, Snipes and Marco Polo trusting us to scale their commerce businesses. Are you ready for a new e-com experience? Talk to Scale today, because life is just too short for painful commerce.
That makes sense. Like, have you seen that same shift with, I guess, like smaller than usual businesses coming to you guys? And I would say also like Shopify businesses as well, that again, maybe historically either wouldn't have back office systems at all, or they might have like a traditional ERP. I guess that's kind of where a bit of a shift that I've seen. Is that something that you've seen as a business as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were the first OMS provider to have an app on the Shopify marketplace for that exact reason. That we're seeing, I guess, the longer tail of retail and e-commerce becoming increasingly interested in OMS, and we see that as a massive growth area for ourselves. Like you say, historically it's been the bigger retailers, but I think because complexity is coming into every scale of operation, the order management system is becoming more needed.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess just kind of beyond the ones that I've already mentioned, like what are the key features that people are looking for when they come to you looking for an OMS?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm probably revisiting what I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, but in effect, a unified view of stock. So the ability to access all of their inventory from the different stock locations. So from the warehouses, from the stores, from the 3PLs, from distributors, potentially even stock that's not yet in the business. So you mentioned maybe people manufacturing in other territories, the ability to sell that stock before it even lands in the warehouses. So that inventory is available to sell at the front end. And then obviously from a front end perspective, you might have one Shopify store, you might have 10 different instances depending upon your scale. You might have native apps, you might be selling on multiple marketplaces, you might be selling in social commerce, you might want to sell in stores, and the OMS system is very much the enabler for all of those different scenarios. So increasingly we find ourselves involved in projects where there's some level of complexity. So whether it's complexity at the front end or complexity at the back end, or a combination of both, typically that's where an order management system is of key value to retailers and partners.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And you mentioned kind of, native apps, point of sale systems there. Like what systems are you typically integrating with from like an inventory side?
Yeah, so I suppose I've probably already painted the picture in terms of us connected to the front end and the back end. So it's a combination of anywhere that has stock. So typically we'd integrate to things like ERPs, we'd integrate to WMSs, we might integrate to a POS if it's a retailer with stores. And that integration to those particular systems gives us the ability to offer that unified stock image. And then typically we'd serve that image up to your different sales channels. So whether it's websites or native apps, indeed, endless aisles for retailers and also marketplaces.
That makes sense. And I get with that side, particularly the retail side, and being able to fulfill orders beyond the stock you've got, so endless aisle and equally like ship from store and stuff like that. Would you typically find that like a brand, I guess, might do a proof of concept, do something within their e-com platform, try and make something work with like a NetSuite or build something themselves, and then like grow into an OMS eventually as they start to get a bit of volume or scale? Yeah,
I mean, it depends. I think there's different sort of starting points for many businesses. We from my perspective, sort of from a sales perspective, you'll speak to retailers that have gone away and tried to extend their ERP. You'll speak to people who've invested in a first generation OMS platform and realized it's hit its limit. So you do tend to start in different places, but normally in some way, shape or form, they've had a good go at trying to do much of it themselves, and they realize actually that the reality of the situation is that the OMS drives operational efficiency, it drives revenue into the business, it reduces operational cost, and also improves customer experience. So it's intrinsically linked to many of the key sort of objectives of the business. So I think the more people understand it, the more they realize that this is almost the digital backbone of lots of commerce channels.
Swap is the e-commerce operating system powering brands looking to scale, from shipping, tracking and package protection to returns and cross-border. Swap improves every pain point in your operations journey, trading your tech stack for the one system that can manage it all. This is e-commerce evolved.
That makes sense. And I think that kind of takes me on to the next question as well, which is like beyond, because we've talked a lot around kind of how retailers can benefit from particularly like the inventory side and being able to, capture demand pre actually handling stock. But the efficiency side that you touched on there, can you talk us through kind of how an OMS can aid like the fulfillment piece and that customer experience you mentioned as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the key sort of, I guess the key mandate of an OMS is to offer smart allocation and sophisticated orchestration as well. And so for that, what we can do is we can route orders to the optimal stock location based on lots of different business parameters. So whether that's cost, whether that's speed, whether that's sustainability, or whether it's a combination of all of those factors. So at scale, we're routing all of the orders to the optimal stock location based on the delivery promise that the consumers selected at the front end, and operationally making sure that happens. So if the business offers a standard delivery, let's say as an example, normally in most businesses, the cheapest way to fulfill it is from your own warehouse. So we'd look at the warehouse. Is the warehouse capable? Yes, it is. Off it goes. If it isn't, then what we can do is go through sort of a chain of rules. So it might be, if they've got stores as an example, what are the 5 closest stores to the consumer? Are they capable of doing it? If they're not, then we could look at an extended region. We could look at the UK. Then we could get into the realms of different split scenarios if that was an option. So it's managing all of those different complexities and giving the optimal output to the business each and every time. And it's, in many respects, it's like marginal gains. It's the more you can incrementally control that cost and make sure it hits that delivery promise. That's the wider efficiency gain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other side of the order routing logic that we've seen clients want is essentially if someone's ordered 5+ items and you've got 2 coming from one warehouse, 3 coming from another, essentially send 5 from one warehouse, things like that, to more the kind of profitability side as well. And
absolutely, and that's not even always the same for every retailer. You mentioned there sort of, if you've got 5 items, if you can fill it from a single location, that's normally the most efficient way to do it. But if those splits happen, when is it profitable? When it's not, within our sort of allocation rules, etc., you can decide based on things like basket value. So let's say it's luxury. If it's 5 coats that are £500 each, it's probably worth splitting it. If it's 5 pairs of socks, it's probably not worth doing it. So we can be quite granular in terms of how we apply rules, whether it's based on basket size, numbers of items, numbers of fulfillment locations. There's lots of real deep down detail in an OMS that really decides whether or not splits are relevant for the business at that moment in time.
That makes sense. And I think the next question is a really interesting one. So we've got, of our clients that have looked at OMS solutions, a lot of them have an ERP, and some of those ERPs would be like a NetSuite or a Navision or D365. And yet they're still kind of investing in an OMS. Like, what's your view on, I guess, why they might be investing in more specialist OMS system and the benefits of housing this within the ERP?
I think a lot of it's to do with the role that both systems play. So typically think about a sort of an ERP as the master of stock. So it's revolving around inventory, it's revolving around finance. Think very much as an OMS as being the master of saleable stock, i.e. what stock is saleable at this moment in time. The ERP doesn't have full visibility of all the other stock locations. So if you've got stores, for example, it won't understand the POS inventory, it won't understand those small changes in terms of deltas, because typically ERPs update reasonably infrequently. We can update in real time. So the OMS knows about orders in all the different sales channels. It knows about orders in all the different marketplaces. It knows about stock that's already been promised to customers. So it gives the business greater agility, and we can do things like what we call buffers, which is the ability to almost like have safety limits where even though we say we've got 10 items, we only want to sell 8. So we make sure that we've got 2 left. And if you get into the realms of bricks and mortar retailers, they've also got other considerations, which is they don't want empty shops. So whilst they might want to leverage their store inventory for ship from store, they don't want to have an empty store with no inventory. So there's lots of different levers and dials that we can manage to make sure that the optimal customer experience happens, but also that the business gains efficiency. So yeah, you can download white papers. There's loads of blogs on this as well, but fundamentally there's servicing different needs.
That makes sense. And I guess presumably, like, so this, I would say, is kind of my area in for a re-platforming project. I might, scope out integrations and that side, but my experience isn't really in the back office side. But I assume that, some of those ERP solutions, which are obviously serving, multiple purposes around kind of finance and warehousing, whatever else, are not going to be best in class when it comes to like sophisticated order routing and stuff like that, right?
No, absolutely not. And all the sort of the candidates you mentioned there in terms of like NetSuite and Dynamics and others are typically systems that we integrate with. They're very much they're an interlinked domain, but they're not the same thing. So think of us as the digital backbone, the e-commerce agility, whereas ERP is very much sort of a foundational business tool. We're giving the ability for the business to flex all of their assets in a digital paradigm.
That makes sense. And I guess just on that as well, just because you see so much of this and presumably you get involved in a lot of back office and, conversations with scale up brands and stuff. So I guess we work quite closely with a consultant called Luke Hodgson, who runs a kind of back office consultancy. And I think whenever we've worked with him, we've ended up in a situation with some of these brands that could be 50, 60, 70 million online, scaled over 3 to 5 years. And it's that same debate around whether or not to build an ERP. And it feels like there's a bit of a shift in the market at the moment where brands are wanting to invest in like a few specialist third parties and actually not put an ERP in the business. Is that something that you've seen? And is that something that drives demand around OneStock and OMS?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose on that topic, I guess a wider topic in terms of, sort of big monolithic vendors, I suppose we're part of the Mac Alliance, and that is all around sort of composability, the ability to offer services through sort of microservices and to be totally cloud native. And I guess that movement is looking for want of a better description, speedboats rather than battleships. They want special industry experts that can give them real capability at speed, and potentially moving forward, if they're not the right vendor, they can swap them in and out quite easily. So I think from an IT perspective, definitely what we're seeing is that retailers are looking at specialist domain experts in OMS, in PIM, in various different disciplines, rather than trying to get everything from a single vendor, because that will limit their speed, and then the lock-in moving forward will really hamper the changes if so they need to.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a trend we've seen, particularly with some of the smaller businesses. So when it comes to like implementing an OMS, so obviously you're integrating with a number of complex systems, and particularly, if you do have an ERP in there, I feel like every brand we've ever worked with has had a lot of resource constraints around that, and there's been a lot of legacy and technical debt around those systems. What advice do you have for a business? Or I guess firstly, what challenges do you commonly see when it comes to actually implementing OMS? What advice do you have on getting around?
I mean, if you think about what we talked about at the outset, the OMS is linked to lots of things. So integration is obviously is not necessarily challenging, but it's always a large chunk of the work, just because you need to connect up lots of different systems. Yeah. And I suppose 9 times out of 10, what we're seeing is most of the clients have some form of middleware. So whether that's something that they're using for other systems that we're then plugging into, that seems to be the direction of travel. And also increasingly, we're starting to see a number of different sort of iPaaS vendors offering those more self-serve tools. So I guess they're the sort of two realms of middleware and or iPaaS. That's probably where that's headed.
Okay, and I guess like in terms of if you've got a more traditional business where there's a lot of complexity around that stuff, do you ever see any kind of like, I guess, routes for accelerating the implementation? I don't know, maybe like bypass certain systems initially, or like MVP and then gradually rolling out more?
I mean, a lot of it is around sort of trying to accelerate building, like we've done with Shopify, to build the app. So that's a sort of a quick accelerator into a project. It takes away a lot of the complexity, and our strategic roadmap moving forward is very much in that direction. We're looking to launch an Adobe connector, I think in the next month or two. Similarly with commerce tools, so we're very looking to make almost this marketplace of extensible pieces that will enable a retailer at a lower cost to accelerate a project. So that's definitely our direction of travel, and that's where we see OMS and other technologies being more pervasive, I guess, with the smaller retailers, to make it more accessible and make the IT headache, I guess, significantly smaller, so they can move at pace without needing lots of people and lots of budget.
I think that's a good move. I think most of the kind of, I guess, challenger platforms at the moment as well are building out kind of app ecosystems and app stores. And I feel like the low code kind of pre-built connector kind of side of the industry is just, growing constantly. And I guess when it comes to choosing an OMS, obviously this is a difficult question because you work for OneStock. But I guess, like, what should a business be looking for? Like, how do you differentiate yourselves in the market, and what do you think the key factors should be?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it I guess if you use the paradigm of e-commerce, there's different types of e-commerce platforms servicing different types of audiences, and even though maybe the OMS space isn't as mature, there is differentiation in market. You do tend to get lots of the more global names at sort of the enterprise level. And then if you move down into the mid-market, the Mac Alliance has a number of different vendors that service that mid-market and probably lower enterprise space really well. I guess there's not as many vendors, certainly not, and I say even regional vendors, there's not that many regional or global vendors servicing the real sort of lower tier of the market at the moment. I think that's probably the next phase for lots of businesses. I think the connectors are definitely going to accelerate that. But I guess in terms of what they should be looking for is something that solves the business problems. I suppose it sounds quite basic, but what the problems that they're trying to solve. So if the vendor that they're speaking to can give them demonstrable ROI or similar looking and smelling retailers, then that should give them the confidence. I mean, from our perspective, where we tend to do quite well is we've got really powerful ROI models where we can prove that we've linked to increases in e-commerce revenue, we've reduced operational costs from a logistics perspective, and we've increased customer experience. So I would ask your vendor to give you, I guess, those proof points about how you're positively impacting the business. Even though this is an IT project and it's an IT tool, ultimately an OMS touches so many different parts of the operation. It touches IT, it touches digital, it touches the consumers. If you've got stores, it touches retail, it touches operations. It's not just about buying the best piece of technology. It's actually buying a piece of technology that solves the day-to-day problems, but also aligns to the strategic objectives of the business. Is about scaling revenue, enhancing capability, improving customer experience. So I guess in a roundabout way, I'm probably saying do your due diligence, work out what your drivers for growth are, and can that vendor really match those objectives?
One thing you said there that was quite interesting is that, I guess, implementing an OMS is an IT project. Some of those brands I mentioned at the start, I would say probably don't have they're high revenue, but they don't have IT teams, even senior IT stakeholders. And actually the driver is coming more from the business teams or the ecom team, and some of those goals that you mentioned there around more the customer experience and also the customer acquisition side as well, making sure that you're getting the most out of your global inventory. And it's being driven by a head of ecom and ecom director. Is that common for you? Is that a trend you're seeing as well? Or is it already typically?
Yeah, I mean, definitely with certain clients where they're IT light, quite often they will lean on consultancy. So we're seeing lots of different partners and consultancies sort of adding value in that domain where they've got familiarization with different e-commerce platforms, different OMSs, almost being that, I guess, that hub between the business and the vendor, where they can accelerate things and also offer expertise when the business doesn't have that capability.
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess pretty much, it's almost impossible to do a podcast nowadays without mentioning AI. And it feels like a lot of what, we talked about when it comes to like the order routing rules and, some of the kind of maybe reporting side really lends itself well to the AI and machine learning kind of development. Like, how do you see that side being built into the OMS? And also, like, how do you see OMS evolving over the next few years?
So I think, I guess you've already touched on a couple of points there in terms of sort of routing. So this is quite an interesting topic, because sometimes retailers can be very prescriptive about how they want things to happen because they don't necessarily understand demand. So I think there's probably going to be some interesting conversations around almost self-learning orchestration rules about learning what optimal looks like to minimize things like cancellations and splits and things that means cost into the business, which I guess will excite people. But also I guess you've got that retail in its essence is very trading focused, and some of those decisions aren't necessarily AI driven, and you've always got that two different outlooks looking in. It'd be interesting to see what does happen over the next 3 to 5 years, but I know from our side we're looking to offer those learning capabilities for the orchestration to improve, I guess, delivery success, improve customer experience, and also link into reducing that cost into the business in terms of splits, cancellations, etc. I guess more widely, one of the areas that OMS is very much moving upstream to the front end of the website, so very much sort of product detail page, product listing page. I think the learnings and sort of AI driven stuff can make that even smarter. At the moment, we can look at the sort of capabilities of the operation, the capabilities of the carriers, but we don't necessarily know what's going on in the market or in the wider world. So I think in some way, bringing AI into those things will certainly really sort of refine, I guess, the delivery promise that's offered, and also, I guess, the experience that the customer gets. A lot of the happy path stuff is quite easy, is not easy to do, but easier to do because it's happening on time. I guess a lot of the innovation around unhappy paths might come forward. So I guess we all know as a consumer, you've been let down by a delivery when it's not happened when it was meant to. I guess a lot of those activities increasing like WISMOs or WISMARs into the business. And for me, you're already seeing it with a number of different vendors at the moment, sort of innovating with AI in that experience where those frequent sort of calls are being tracked digitally and rerouted and deflected into other directions. So I think from an AI perspective, definitely orchestration and allocation, refinements in terms of availability to promise, and probably as well from that post-purchase piece as well, offering sort of, I guess, more customer friendly and responsive information.
So my next question is around the roadmap. The one thing that you said, or you touched on then, that I guess is quite an interesting trend that I hadn't really thought about, is how much consolidation there is across a few different vendors in this area. So I guess OMS is one thing, and I would say probably the more specialist, complex area out of these. But, there's a lot of like delivery platforms that are doing really well at the moment. Like Ingrid is one that I think is going to come on the podcast soon, and they seem to be doing really well in the market. And then you've got the Narvas and some of the kind of more specialist returns platforms. And it does feel like all of those areas are kind of coming into one. Like, is that something that you've seen as well? Like, is that, I guess, like...
Yeah, I mean, I think they all sit in slightly different segments of the value chain. If you think about the purchase to fulfill or purchase to delivered,
yeah,
quite often you've got different sort of pieces of the value chain there. I guess that end-to-end visibility is something that only the OMS has, which is interesting for us. But I think from a vendor perspective, part of our roadmap is very much around becoming an open OMS. So we're sort of agnostic to some extent. So we've got connectors into e-commerce platforms, we've got connectors into post-purchase platforms, we've got connectors into all the carriers and different forms of delivery to not try and define what good looks like, but let the retailer or the brand decide, well, I've already made these selections from my technology perspective because these fit my objectives really well, to be really open and really easy to integrate to and to make, I guess, to link it all together very easily from a technical perspective to minimize that time to value and also to reduce the complexity.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Yeah, really interesting how those spaces will end up working closer together. So yeah, roadmap. What else are you working on at the moment? We obviously talked a bit about AI. You've obviously raised a lot of money. What's coming up? Where are you going to prioritize?
I guess, without wanting to reveal any secrets or go too much into detail, I mean, from our perspective, we're seeing quite a lot of growth in the B2B market. So historically, the majority of our clients are probably in the B2C, but we are seeing quite a lot of growth within B2B. So that's certainly an area of interest for us. And also geographically, majority of our clients are in Europe. We do have sort of 30 plus clients, but the vast majority are in Europe. So it's a true globalization, I guess, in the business where we're going to get feet on the ground on other continents and to do more projects. So I guess in terms of growth aspirations, it's to widen the market, but also maybe to continue to be a domain expert in B2C and D2C, but maybe enhance our capabilities in B2B as well.
That makes sense. And again, anything else from a feature or kind of product perspective that you're planning on doubling down?
I mean, I guess one of our sort of real strong points, and we've probably not really touched upon it in this interview, is omnichannel. So we've got some really sort of smart logic around gamification for the stores. So where retailers have physical stores as well. One of the sort of the hidden pitfalls, I guess, of store-based fulfillment are cancellations, because stock moves quite quickly in stores. It might mean in the changing room, it might mean someone's bag. So we've got this concept similar to sort of Uber or Deliveroo, where rather than sending the order to a specific location, we can send it to a cohort that sort of meet those parameters, and they need to claim that order. And that gamification process has a real sort of positive impact on reducing cancellations, first-time delivery success, and lots of other metrics. So that's something we're already using AI for that, to be honest, but that's something where we definitely really differentiate. Quite often, most OMS platforms where they do ship from store are quite waterfall in their approach. You send it to store A, then to store B, then to store C. Time moves on, stock positions move, and the end result is quite often you get cancellations. So that whole concept of someone claiming that order, processing it, has really sort of positive impact to from a customer experience perspective, but also from a revenue perspective for the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's actually another trend we've seen, or like bits of what you just said, or another trend we've seen recently around our clients trying to leverage store stock better in key cities to basically provide a better customer experience, particularly to their top customers. So like a couple of our clients are building 1 hour delivery slots in London, New York, LA for VIPs, like stuff like that. I guess that falls very much into that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also there's you do get lots of strange quirks within that type of stuff. So Petsoma is an example. They're sort of one of our clients, and they offer a 1 hour click and collect promise. So they use our technology to know that stock's in that local store. They fulfill it, they pick, pack and dispatch it, customer comes in and collects it. And you get sort of so that's the quickest way that they can fulfill, but yet it's also the cheapest way that they can fulfill. So they're not paying the carrier sort of £5 to come in and deliver the parcel. So that sort of wins it in terms of a speed perspective, but also in terms of cost to serve. And then from an environmental perspective, you can get some other weird quirks. So we've got some other clients that do sort of 1 hour collects, and they might be using someone like Stuart or Uber, and they might be going in on bikes. So whilst it's they can serve the customer in an hour, it's a super quick delivery, but actually it might be the most sustainable delivery because the stock is a mile away from the customer. Someone's going in on a bike to deliver it. So you do get lots of these sort of strange quirks where quick and sustainable can be the same thing, which seems counterintuitive in some respects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, interesting trends that actually I think we'll see a lot more of that, particularly the sustainable, last mile delivery services. So that's all.
Yeah, and as well as the roadmap, we've got. I'll just jump back to roadmap. Sorry, Paul. Sustainability again is, I guess, one of the reasons for the investment in us as well. We've always had sustainability in sort of our DNA. Our founder is sort of very sort of environmentally focused, and even though commerce in essence isn't that sustainable, in our small way, we can do things from a routing perspective, from a shipping perspective, to select the stuff that's closest to the consumer, select the delivery method that's most sustainable. So there are little small wins that we can offer, and we can also expose them at the front end as well. So rather than just selecting the quickest delivery or the cheapest delivery, if the consumer wants the most sustainable delivery, they can do that, and we can push that information up to the front end. So yes, that's another probably big area of innovation for us as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that actually on some big retail sites, and yeah, I think that's a really cool kind of movement in the industry. One thing I was going to say actually, when you were talking about pets at home, I think it's really cool that they're doing that, and they're actually, I guess, looking at the like global profitability of the order, because I feel like a lot of the bigger retailers we've worked with, that's very much a political issue, and the whole retail versus digital, and the separate P&Ls and everything else have kind of prevented that from ever really going anywhere. So that's really interesting that they've done that, and that would actually be a really interesting podcast to do at some point. We could get someone from them on, but there's definitely sort of other interesting bits around that, around data acquisition as well, because you're collecting lots of information. People that historically bricks and mortar customers that you don't really know who they are and what the habits are. It's bridging that gap between data points, and then you can do lots of other really, really clever stuff with that as well. 100%. When you're providing that convenience, you're in a much better position to capture more data as well. Like, customers are a lot more willing to hand it over. Perfect. So yeah, this was really interesting. Really enjoyed it. I personally find this area super interesting, and I'm enjoying kind of seeing it develop and seeing you guys come down market a bit as well. And really interesting. So thanks very much for coming on. If people want to find out more about OneStock or kind of ask you any questions about the product, how would they get in touch with you?
So you can find us online, www.onestock-retail.com. We will be at the Verve event next week if anyone's around. Alternative, we're at many different trade events, or find us on LinkedIn. We're quite accessible. Type in OneStock, and hopefully, given the recent fundraise, we should be highly accessible.
Absolutely, yeah. Perfect. And thanks everyone for listening. Make sure you're following Inside Commerce on LinkedIn and have subscribed to the LinkedIn newsletter. I usually forget to add that bit, and James gets annoyed with me, so remembered it this time. And then as always, if you've got any feedback or anything, or any suggestions for future episodes, feel free to drop James a line. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.